Chick-fil-A. I love Chick-fil-A. I mean, those chicken sandwiches are so tasty, and those fries are amazing, and they have the best chocolate chip cookies of any restaurant that I've ever been to. And every time I leave church on Sunday, I get a craving for Chick-fil-A. And then about a minute later, it hits me. It's Sunday. They're closed. Every single Sunday, they're closed. And it makes you wonder, why would a restaurant make such a poor business decision? I mean, why would they close on a Sunday, especially now when drive-through is the only option for a lot of restaurants? Why would they lose that business? I read an article in the Los Angeles Times that said the estimated Chick-fil-A loses probably about $47 million a year by closing on Sundays. And even last year during the Super Bowl, at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, Chick-fil-A has a restaurant in the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, and they closed on Super Bowl Sunday. They missed out on purchases from over 70,000 fans. And it makes you think, why would they do that? That doesn't make any sense. It has to hurt their bottom line, right? Well, actually, it's quite the opposite. There was an article in QSR magazine last year that said, in that past year, Chick-fil-A made more money per restaurant than any other fast food restaurant. And that with only being open 6 days a week. And it makes you wonder, how is that possible? How could they be more productive in 6 days when everybody else is doing 7? How could that be? Well, the founder of Chick-fil-A lives by this principle called Sabbath, and he chooses to run his business that way. Now, if you grow up in church, you might have heard of this term called Sabbath. It's traditionally on Sunday, on this day, where Christians rest and take time to worship God. But where did that all start? Where did this idea of Sabbath come from? So if you go back to the beginning of the Bible, Genesis 2, we have this account of God creating the earth. So he makes the earth and the moon and the stars and the animals and people and everything. He creates it all. And then on the seventh day, it says he rested. Now, when I was a kid, I thought, okay, so did he go to sleep? Did he take a nap? That's what I thought. But as I got older, I started to think, okay, but if God is all powerful, why would he need to rest, right? And even in the Psalms, it said that God doesn't sleep nor does he slumber. So what was he doing? Well, the term that is used, the Hebrew word in this passage, is called Shabbat. And Shabbat means to stop or to cease. So God was not resting because he was tired. He was resting because he was done. He was satisfied in his creation, and he was finished. It's kind of like when I ask my husband to clean up the living room, and he picks up 2 things and then goes and sits on the couch, because in his mind, he's done, he's finished. And on that 7th day, God was satisfied in his work that he had finished his creation. So fast forward from there to the book of Exodus, and we have God's people, the Israelites, and they are living in Egypt in slavery. In fact, they've been in slavery for over 400 years. They were doing hard labor every day, 7 days a week. The word rest was not even in their vocabulary. And so they were stuck here in slavery, and then God sent this man Moses to come and deliver them from their captivity and help them escape desert. And he did, and they did, and everything was great, and here they were free from their slavery out in the desert until they started to get hungry. And then they started to complain and get upset and angry, and they came to Moses and they said, "Why can't you let us go back to Egypt and be slaves again rather than die out here of hunger?" And so Moses listened to their complaints, and so he went to God and said, "All right, God, you need to do a miracle. These people are hungry." And so God did. He rained down this bread, this thin from heaven called manna. And every day this bread would come down to the earth. And each day the Israelites, they would go out and they would collect this bread, and there would always be exactly enough to get them through that day. And so every day they would go out and they would collect this bread. Well, on the 6th day, they noticed something kind of strange. There was twice as much bread, twice as much manna as there had been any other day. And so they came to Moses and asked for an explanation, and this is what he told them. "This is what the Lord commanded. Tomorrow will be a day of complete rest, a holy Sabbath day set apart for the Lord. So bake or boil as much as you want today and set aside what is left for tomorrow." And so they set some aside, and then the next day, on the seventh day, they found that they had just enough for that seventh day. But there were some people who still went out on the seventh day to collect the manna. And this is what it says in Exodus. "Some of the people went out anyway on the seventh day, but they found no food. The Lord asked Moses, 'How long will these people refuse to obey my commands and instructions? They must realize that the Sabbath day is the Lord's gift to you. This is why he gives you a 2-day supply on the 6th day, so there'll be enough for 2 days. On the Sabbath day, you must each stay in your place. Do not go out and pick up food on the 7th day.' So the people did not gather any food on the 7th day." So why did these people blatantly disobey God and go out and collect on the 7th day? And why was it so important to God that they didn't? Well, I believe it's because God wanted them to trust him. He wanted them to trust that if they took a day to rest and to honor him, that he would provide for every need that they have. But some of them couldn't do it. They were afraid that if they sat back and waited, they would go hungry. And they couldn't wrap their minds around the idea that God could provide for them. And that's our big idea for today. And it's that you can't have true rest without trust. You can't have true rest without trust. And I can kind of relate to those seventh-day gatherers, because as soon as I heard the news that schools are canceled and all our extracurricular events aren't happening and everything at the jar was going to be postponed, as soon as I heard that, immediately I start making this mental list of all the things I could do, right? Like, oh, I'm going to get my house cleaned and organized and have all these home improvement projects that we could do. And I started thinking about how I could work ahead at the office and all of these different things. And then I had to stop myself for a minute and ask myself, what if God instead wants me to take this time to rest and to reconnect with him? But the truth is, honestly, I'm just not that good at resting. But I am starting to see the value of it. And it's something that God is trying to teach me. You see, I work part-time outside of the home, and I'm really grateful for that. It means I get more time with my kids and everything, but I've noticed in the past couple years that I've been working every day of the week. And on some days, on my days off, it may only be an hour here or two here and there. But even when I wasn't working, I found that I was thinking about the work that I was going to be doing later that day. And pretty soon I started feeling exhausted, and my anxiety was going through the roof. And so right around that time, I sensed God kind of prompting me to take one day of the week, and for me that was Monday, and not do any work. And so it took a little bit of planning and rearranging, but I was able to work that out and get that day where I wasn't going to do any work. And I did start to feel a little bit better, a little more rested. But then God took it to another level that was a little too personal, and he started to ask me to not answer any phone call, not make any phone calls, not send any emails that day. And I was like, okay, wait a minute, God. I don't know how I feel about that, because what if I disappoint somebody, or what if I miss something, or someone gets upset with me? And I started to worry that I would get behind at work, and I began to get stressed out. But when I finally listened and said, all right, God, if this is what you want me to do, it's what I'll do, and I stopped doing any work on that day, it was awesome. I mean, I was able to play with my kids and not be thinking about other things and just enjoy that time with them, and I had more time to read and to pray and just kind of connect with God. Got to take a nap sometimes too, and it was just a really awesome thing, and I'm so glad that God kind of challenged me in that. Well, at the beginning of this year, I felt God challenging me even more to not even open my email on Mondays. And guess how many times I've successfully done that? Yeah, 0. Goose egg. I've completely failed at that. But it's my goal, and I want to keep working toward it, and I'm going to keep working towards it, because I realize that truly trusting God and experiencing that Sabbath rest, part of that is resting my body. And for all of us, it's resting our bodies. So How about you? How are you doing with resting your body? You know, for many of you watching, for these past couple weeks, you have been forced to stop pretty much everything. And for some of you, that might really be a struggle. I mean, maybe you're the type of person that you're sending emails at 2 o'clock in the morning. Maybe you go on 4 hours of sleep just trying to stay ahead, or maybe every waking moment you're thinking about work. For others of you, maybe you don't work outside the home, but you've packed your day with volunteer activities or social events, and you just can't seem to catch your breath, and life has felt like a whirlwind. And now everything has come to a halt, and you're lost, and you don't know what to do with yourself. You're not used to this feeling. And if that's you, and you're feeling lost at this time, I want to ask you, do you think that maybe even a tiny little part of that feeling is because of a lack of trust in God? Are you having a hard time trusting God that if you choose to rest, that God will provide enough money for you and for your family? Is it a struggle for you to believe that you could rest and still be successful in your work or get the next promotion? Are you afraid that if you rest, you might disappoint someone, or you might lose your image as the super mom or the super dad? If so, I want to encourage you to put your faith out there, and during this time of social distancing, to just take one day and to stop, to cease, and to Shabbat. Put away your laptop, turn off your phone, stop rushing around, and just be still. And even as I say that, I wonder if some of you are starting to feel that anxiety come up, because that thought of resting, it scares you and it makes you feel anxious. And if that's true for you, I think God wants to say, stop, just for a little while. Stop and rest and spend time with me. Trust that I'll provide and that I'll bless your obedience. And stop. And when life goes back to normal, and our calendars are full and our schedules are packed once again, don't look back on this time and say, wow, you know, that was really great. I was really focused on God and spending all this quality time with my family, and it was just restful. But, you know, that was then, this is now, that's over, and it was nice while it lasted, but it's over now. No, don't do that. Hold on to that Sabbath rest. Make it a part of your life. Schedule rest into your calendar. Make it a priority. Design your life around it. Don't give up on it. And don't disregard this beautiful, wonderful gift that God has given us of rest. Now, you might be thinking, okay, I can rest, but what am I supposed to do when I rest? Like, do I just lay on the couch all day and watch TV? Should I be playing video games? Am I supposed to be praying and reading the Bible? What is that supposed to look like? Well, I think rest looks different for everybody, and what's restful for me may not be restful for you. But one thing that we can look at to get an idea of what rest can look like is the life of Jesus and how he rested and what the Sabbath looked like for him. And we do see times in the Bible where Jesus took a nap and he physically rested. But also we see on the Sabbath, he was very active. And there were things that he did that sort of re-energized him and gave him energy. So we'll just look at a couple of passages here and look at Jesus' example. So we're going to start in Luke 4, verse 16. It says this: when he, Jesus, came to the village of Nazareth, his boyhood home, he went as usual to the synagogue on the Sabbath and stood up to read the scriptures. So if you look right after the words he went, it says, as usual. This was a habit for him to go to the synagogue, which was his church. So Jesus made it a priority every Sabbath that he was going to be in church and experience rest by being in God's presence. And so for us, that looks like coming to church, or in this case, streaming church together and just kind of resting and being with God and being with his presence. Let's look at another passage here. This is from Matthew 12. Verse 9, it says, then Jesus went over to their synagogue, where he noticed a man with a deformed hand. The Pharisees asked Jesus, does the law permit a person to work by healing on the Sabbath? They were hoping he would say yes, so they could bring charges against him. And he answered, if you had a sheep that fell into a well on the Sabbath, wouldn't you work to pull it out? Of course you would. And how much more valuable is a person than a sheep? Yes, the law permits you to do good on the Sabbath. And then he said to the man, hold out your hand. And so the man held out his hand, and it was restored, just like the other one. Jesus makes it very clear here that it's always honors God to do good on the Sabbath. So think about ways that you can do good on the Sabbath. Serve your family on the Sabbath, or call someone that you know that's lonely and have a conversation with them, or go pick up groceries for an elderly person, or whatever it might be. Use the Sabbath to do good. Let's look at one more passage again from Matthew 12, verse 1. It says, about that time, Jesus was walking through some grain fields on the Sabbath. His disciples were hungry, and so they began breaking off some heads of grain and eating them. So this idea of kind of gleaning the fields that Jesus was doing with his disciples was like the first century equivalent of going through a drive-through, pretty much. So Jesus was picking up a meal with his disciples, the people that he most was committed to. And so for us, this might look like spending time with the people that you love the most and are committed to. You know, go pick up some carry out and sit down and have a meal together and tell stories, talk about your day, tell jokes, and just enjoy that time that you're being together. So to follow Jesus' example, spend time enjoying that Sabbath rest that God has given you. You know, take a nap, have a meal with your family, do good for someone, serve someone, enjoy that gift. But above all, rest, knowing that you can have confidence that God is in control. Now, there are some schedules that make it really difficult to be able to have kind of a traditional Sabbath day of rest. And I have a friend, for example, in my small group, who she works at the hospital, which is, you know, an essential job, and she works 7 days on and 7 days off. So on those weeks that she's on, she can't take a day off. And so I asked her to tell me, what does Sabbath look like for you? And this is what she said. On the weeks I'm working, I usually take my dinner breaks to listen to a church service, a podcast, or a few minutes of quiet time. Or in the time that I'm alone, I might take a nap or just a few hours to rest and rejuvenate. I like to have a little quiet time with God too. I have another friend who's a stay-at-home mom, and you might be thinking, well, every day is a day of rest for her, right? Well, no. If you think that, you're wrong, because she works 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and even though she loves her job, she never gets a break from it. And some of you have probably become stay-at-home parents the last week or so, and so you understand what that feels like. So I asked her, what does Sabbath look like for you? And this is what she said. If I'm being honest, this is a very hard thing for me. I live in my work zone, so for me to see my house, my laundry, my lack of groceries, it's hard to take a rest on Sunday, but it's something I've been working on. First of all, we made a choice to gear Sundays to circle around church. It's our priority. We don't plan anything during that time. I try and make it a point to have leftovers on Sunday, get laundry done and put away before Sunday, get groceries before Sunday. So all this means Friday and Saturday can be very busy for me. But Sabbath rest is not just about not doing chores, but it's about doing all this so I can invest time to go to church, personal time with God, quality time with my family. It's not a perfect system, but that's how we try to do it. So whatever you need to do to have Sabbath rest, whatever that looks like for you, whether it's morning to bedtime or on Sunday or something completely different, do it. Take that time for rest and let God prove to you that he can do more in 7 days with your trust than in 6 days with your trust than in 7 days without it. So the first way that we can experience true rest is through resting our bodies. And the second way that we can experience true rest is by resting our minds. So I mentioned earlier that a lot of times when I try to take a nap, I end up just laying there and staring at the ceiling. And that's because I have a really hard time shutting my mind down. I feel like my mind is just going constantly, trying to figure things out and worrying about the future and worrying about the past. It's really hard for me to let my mind rest. And I wonder, and maybe, you know, sporting events are canceled and social events are canceled. And so you have a bunch of free time suddenly, but yet your mind is restless and you're distracted by anxious thoughts. You know, maybe you wonder what's going to happen to the economy, or you question, you know, when will life go back to normal? Or you worry about whether you or someone you love is going to get sick. And maybe you're sitting there on the couch, you know, watching a TV through that you have no idea what the story is because your mind is distracted by anxious thoughts. Or maybe you're outside playing with the kids and you're there physically, but they can tell they don't have your full attention because your thoughts and your mind is elsewhere. And I often feel this way because even when my body is at rest, a lot of times my mind is not. My mind is restless. I experienced this a couple months ago when I was sitting in my car before work, just kind of talking to God and having a conversation with him, but I really couldn't focus on God because I was distracted because I was in charge of this conference for teen girls. And I had just found out that my venue for the conference fell through. And so I was in panic mode, like, what am I going to do about this conference? We need to have a venue. And as I'm worrying and panicking about this, I sensed God just kind of whisper in my heart, not out loud, just in my heart, be still. And I was like, okay, God, I can't be still right now. I have to figure out this venue thing. I need to make some calls and send some emails. Like, I need to figure this out. We need to have a venue. But again, I sensed him say, be still. And so I took a deep breath and I said, okay, God, you want me to be still, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to trust you with this, and I'm not going to think about it anymore. So I prayed for a little bit longer, and then I went into the office, and I opened up my email. And right there in my email, almost to the minute that I had had that conversation with God about being still, there was an email. And guess what it said? We had a venue. Something had worked out perfectly, exactly what we needed. And we ended up having that conference, and it all worked out great, and so many girls' lives were touched, and everything was awesome. And it just makes me think, why don't I do that more often? Why don't I just be still and say, God, I trust you, and know that things are going to work out? And the truth is, over the past couple weeks, I have had to remind myself to be still over and over again. Like when I found out that school was canceled, and we had to figure out what we were going to do about childcare. Be still. Or when we found out we couldn't have church here at the Civic and we had 2 days to figure it out. Be still. Or when I found out I couldn't meet face to face with my small group, some of my best friends, I wasn't going to be able to see them. Be still. And over again, God has come through and these things have worked out and he's taking care of it. And I'm continuing to have to remind myself, be still, be still, be still. Well, several weeks ago, before I had even ever heard the term COVID-19 or social distancing, all that was completely foreign to me, I read this passage in Proverbs, and it seems so relevant to what we're going through today. I love the Message version of it. This is what it says. It's a promise that if you trust in God, you'll take afternoon naps without a worry. You'll enjoy a good night's sleep. No need to panic over alarms or surprises or predictions that doomsday's just around the corner, because God will be right there with you. He'll keep you safe and sound. You know, this passage makes me think of someone that I know that takes great afternoon naps, and that is my son, Joshua. And Joshua is 1 year old, 1.5. And the other day, had my day off, and he was ready for a nap. And so I laid him down in his crib, and he put his little hands behind his head like he does, and just kind of drifted off to sleep. Well, about half an hour later, I hear him screaming and crying from his room. Something had startled him awake, and I knew he wasn't going to go back to sleep. So I went into his room, and I picked him up out of his crib, and we sat down in the rocking chair, and I just held him in my arms. And about a minute later, this was the result. He was sleeping like a baby in my arms. So why is it that he was screaming and crying in his crib, but a minute later in my arms, he was fast asleep without a care in the world? Well, it's because he was with me, and he trusts me, and he knows that I'm his mom, and I'm not going to let any harm come to him. And he knew that he could be at peace while I was there with him. And that's what God, our Father, wants to do for us. He wants to hold us in his arms and let us know that it's going to be okay. He wants us to rest and to trust in him. And So I want to give you all a restful moment like that today. And so the band is going to come up and they're going to sing a song called Be Still. And while they sing that song, I want you to just sit back and relax wherever you are, on your couch, on your bed, wherever you are. Sit back and rest. Close your eyes if you want to. If you fall asleep, that's okay. But I want you to sit back, rest, relax, and just listen to the slow and constant and steady beat of his heart.
Every fear to the heavens, watch them disappear in your presence. One by one they fall into perfect peace. Everything, yeah, you listen through my anxious thoughts with compassion. One by one they fall into perfect peace. So I will be still. Oh, I will be still and know that you are God.
There's a story in the Bible where Jesus is talking to a group of people, and these aren't religious people. These are people who, back in that day, would probably have been called sinners. But they had grown up in this religious system where they were told that they had to do this and this and this and stop doing this and stop doing that. And there were all these rules and regulations that if they didn't follow them, that God would never accept them, that God would never love them. And these people, they were tired. And Jesus looked at them with compassion in his eyes and he said, "Are you tired, worn out, burned out on religion? Come to me. Get away with me and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly." And I wonder if maybe today some of you feel that way. Maybe you have tried your whole life to try to do everything right and try to live up to this perfect standard, and you just don't feel good enough. And maybe you haven't been to church in a long time because you've always felt like you didn't measure up. And maybe today you are tired. And I think what you need today is rest for your souls. And I think what Jesus wants to say to you today is, come to me and I will give you rest. And if today you want to receive that rest, that true rest that can only come from trusting in God and having a relationship with him, then I want to lead you in a prayer today. And this is my prayer, but it can be your prayer too if you mean it in your heart. And you know, here at the Jar, we never pray alone. We always pray together. So even though you may be alone, me for everything that I've done wrong. I commit my life to living for you. Amen. Well, if you prayed that prayer just now, there is a button on this page that said, "I accepted Christ." And I'd love for you to just hit that button so I can celebrate that with you and support you in that decision. And if you would like someone to pray with you, there'll be people online that would be happy to do that with you. Well, I hope you all have a wonderful and a restful week. Have a great Sunday and know that you're loved in this place.
I was buried beneath my shame. Who could carry the kind of weight? Oh, it was my turn till I met you. I was breathing